Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. This is episode 97. It is September 11th, 2022. And this week, we're going to be covering a whole lot of news. There's some big events from the past week. We're going to be here for the next 6 or 7 hours, breaking it apart, analyzing it, going deep dive into information. I've got a whole bunch of information here that we're going to cover on the 21st anniversary of 9/11. And before we do that, let's get a little sampling of the stories we might be covering tonight. Things like there was a really big event this past week. It's slipping my mind. Somebody passed away. Right. The Queen of England passed away. She was aged 96.
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world.
I just wonder what you thought, what your first reaction was when you heard the news that the Queen is under medical supervision.
I mean, I think it's pretty sad, like, when anyone kind of gets in that position, like, you wouldn't want that to happen to your own family member. But I'm not, like, the biggest fan of the Queen or just, like, the monarchy in general, so I wasn't, like, that upset or overwhelmed by it. It was just something that happens, I guess.
You're not the biggest fan of the monarchy. I wonder why.
Mainly to do with like British like colonial history, things like that. A lot of things that have gone on which have been quite shady, even like recently with like Prince Andrew and everything. Yeah, I'm not really their biggest fan.
And that, of course, kicks off Operation Unicorn, the transfer of power from Elizabeth II to King Charles III. We'll just call him KC3 for the rest of the night. We're going to have to talk about him a lot. We're going to need an abbreviation. King Charles III is too long, even for this long form podcast. So once we get through Operation Unicorn and we understand what it means to have a 71-year-old king who has taken the throne, many people think 50 years he hasn't had a job and he's just now getting his first job. No. He's had a job for the past 50 years. We're going to go into it in deep detail tonight.
So there it is. A tweet from June 3rd, 2020. Yeah, this is from at Clarence House, the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall. The Great Reset Initiative is designed to ensure businesses and communities build back better by putting sustainable business practices at the heart of their operations as they begin to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. And they tagged the World Economic Forum.
And that was June 3rd, 2020. So we're in 3 months into the pandemic, and they're already, and that he's the first one who sort of gives the nod to this new movement.
We have an incredible opportunity to create entirely new sustainable industries, investing in nature as the true engine of our economy.
The current global crisis has disrupted every aspect of our lives, but it has also presented us with an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to reset and accelerate efforts to improve the state of our world.
Changing our current trajectory will require bold and imaginative action, together with determination and decisive leadership. In order to secure our future and to prosper, we need to evolve our economic model, putting people and planet at the heart of global value creation. If there is one critical lesson we have to learn from this crisis, we need to put nature at the heart of how we operate. We are on the verge of catalytic breakthroughs that will alter our view of what is possible and profitable within the framework of a sustainable future. We need nothing short of a paradigm shift, one that inspires action at revolutionary levels and pace. We simply cannot waste any more time. The only limit is our willingness to act. And the time to act is now.
It affects things like your gas tank, the price with which you fill your refrigerator, food prices, gas prices, economy, carbon neutral market, green agenda. All these things are Prince Charles. It's not just Klaus Schwab.
Everyone says that today, the royal family is nothing more than a ceremonial figure, even though they choose the government, have final approval over all legislation, and own half the country. And so while we remember Queen Elizabeth, let us not forget how this incestuous family has used their own children to gain power. Parliamentary lawfare over trading rights between England and Scotland led to the first iteration of the United Kingdom in 1707 and created the legal groundwork for George of Hanover to be crowned King of England and Ireland in 1714. He was 55 years old, married to his first cousin, and didn't speak any English because he was from the German House of Hanover. The English people were not happy about this, and his coronation was met with riots all across the country, followed by years of rebellions. His grandson, King George III, inspired the American Revolution, and when his granddaughter Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert, the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha took sway over the country. Throughout the First World War, the people of England were questioning the loyalty of the German bloodlines who ruled over them, which prompted the royal family to change their name to Windsor in 1917. 9 years later, Queen Elizabeth was born, who was initiated into the Druid Order in 1946, married Prince Philip of Nazi bloodlines in 1947, and gave birth to Charles in 1948. In 2010, William Coombs, survivor of Canada's infamous residential schools where the mass graves of children were found, claimed to have witnessed Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip visit the Kamloops Residential School in 1964, where they took 10 of the children away with them, never to return. A year later, William Coombs dies in the hospital. In 1988, Prince Philip told the German press that he hopes to be reincarnated as a deadly virus to help with the population problem. And his son, King Charles, likes to joke on television how he is related to Dracula.
His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who can trace his ancestry back to Romania's dark and distant past.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, you see. So I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
As it were.
These royals are the result of an incestuous breeding program wherein children were used as a way to gain power over the masses. So it's no surprise that they are caught up with the likes of Jeffrey Epstein, who made a living using children to leverage power, and Jimmy Savile, who had unfettered access to rape hundreds of children inside NHS hospitals and was a dear friend of King Charles. Along with Klaus Schwab, King Charles is a founder of the Great Reset. He's as green as Greta Thunberg, and last year he announced the need for a military-style campaign to bring the world to zero emissions.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition. So, how do we do it?
We know how they'll do it. By cutting off Europe's fuel and forcing the people back into the 1700s.
Also tonight, we're going to have special guest Johnny Vedmore. He's going to cover his most recent article on Klaus Schwab, Henry Kissinger, and the other non-elected rulers who try to make a plan for our future that doesn't include freedom. I think it sucks. We could do better.
What do you see as like the ideological differences between like what was taught for the young leaders, the international seminar, sort of juxtaposed to the World Economic Forum and what manifested later in regards to Schwab's initiative?
I I think they're basically, yeah. I think they're basically the same thing. I think it's one single line. I would also assume that there's a piece in the middle that I haven't quite found yet. Because let me explain. It starts off in 1950, 1951. Kissinger, Yandel Elliott, other people, what's his name? Begins with C. I can't remember. Anyway, they all sit around. They say, okay, we're going to create this international seminar. We're going to pilot it. It goes really well, and they start recruiting people from around the world. I found these wonderful adverts from the Lahore Military Gazette in 1959. Advertising for the international seminar, and they're saying you can come to the international seminar and we'll pay everything for you, we'll give you all of this, the stay will be free, we'll fly you in and out, so we only want the best, and only 50 are gonna come per year, so it's got to be the tip top, the best. And this became really refined, and by 1950 1960 they pushed it on a little bit further. They made it a bit bigger, made it a bit grander, and they just started pumping out real leaders. But by this time, they realized they didn't need the structure of the international seminar itself, funded by the CIA. By the time it comes to 1966 and 1967, it's a real interesting thing that I wanted to include in this article, but it's probably going to be an article in itself. And I don't mind speaking about it now because it's a very complicated thing. Someone who came to Harvard after it had been exposed about the CIA funding and the international seminar had been wound down, someone who came to Harvard was Benazir Bhutto, whose father was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and would be soon the president of Pakistan, I think the fourth or prime minister of Pakistan. I can't remember if he's president or prime minister. Do forgive me. But he would be the leader of the Pakistan. So of course, Benazir Bhutto would also be leader twice of Pakistan and would be accused of selling, giving nuclear weapons technologies over to North Korea and Iran during her time. She would put into Harvard just in about, I think it was 1970, 1971, she went to Harvard. So it was after the course, the international seminar had been wound down. And who was the person who her father put in charge of mentoring her? None other than John Kenneth Galbraith, who was, of course, the mentor. Yes. So the mentor of one of the main mentors of Klaus Schwab. And he would put his son in charge of Benazir Bhutto while she was there. And she went there early. She was 16 when she arrived there. And she did all of the things John Kenneth Galbraith did. So all of the Vietnam, the protests against Vietnam, she was involved in that directly alongside him as well. But like later on, you can see that Schwab, his mentor, John Kenneth Galbraith, mentor Schwab. Schwab goes on to straight away, 1967, goes straight on to work for Schulze Escher Weiss and will give nuclear technologies over to the South African apartheid regime illegally. And Benazir Bhutto does the same later after being mentored by John Kenneth Galbraith. And well, at least his son passed on because Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and John Kenneth Galbraith had originally met when Mrs. Kennedy, oh no, I forgot her name. Mrs. Kennedy came to India while he was a diplomat. JFK made John Kenneth Galbraith the diplomat for India, and when his wife visited, he met with them, and they met at that time. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto met John Kenneth Galbraith and Kennedy. So, yeah, it's sort of like a really interesting.
Later they assassinated her.
Yes, and later they assassinated. They tried a couple of times, and after she was assassinated, her the person who she who had been accused of leaking the nuclear technology to Iran and North Korea said it was all her, and she had ordered him to do it and ordered him to keep it secret. So that is something that has to be taken into account. But still, it's extremely interesting that John Kenneth Galbraith was put in charge of mentoring her, or at least assigning his own son to be the mentor of her when Klaus Schwab did the same sort of thing. I mean, there's Harvard. Yeah, Harvard was that. John Kenneth Galbraith is one of the most interesting characters in all of history. I think he's a super spy. He's 6'8" tall. It's like if you want someone who's gonna like not stand out in the crowd, you don't choose John Kenneth Galbraith, and that's why they chose him. No one would ever suspect him, would they?
So let's go to this Tucker Carlson clip with the internet troll Alex Stein, who turns out to be a little bit more than a troll. Maybe the troll was like a thin veneer to bring the intellectual perspective to someone like Tucker. And I don't think it's Tucker's first time hearing it, but he does a good job doing his, oh, really? Really? I didn't know that. So let's check it out.
And then, we have to get conspiratorial, and we look at the Iran-Contra. The CIA was trading drugs with Nicaraguans for guns. We were giving them guns, and then they were taking that cocaine, and they were flying it into Mena, Arkansas, which Bill Clinton happened to be the governor of that state. And they were taking those drugs, and they were putting them in Florida. They were putting in California, Freeway Ricky Ross. So they created the crack epidemic. So the same people that did that, they're creating the problems that we have today. So it's just a new drug for a new era.
Amazing.
Not really.
So,
it's scary.
No.
I know what you mean. I know you mean that sarcastically.
Yeah, no, but it's just interesting because, I mean, I grew up in a world where, and speaking for myself, I actually believe that conspiracy theories were the way that dumb, uninformed people explained a complex world.
Yeah.
If you couldn't understand what was actually happening, you resorted to a conspiracy theory, and that was a mark of a low IQ.
Of course.
Now, I always think this. The more informed, the smarter the person, the more likely they are to be connecting the dots that you're connecting. So you grew up in a world where people just like assumed that the system was not on the level, I think.
Well, it's called cognitive dissonance. It's like, the government is, has done corrupt stuff. There's classified levels of intelligence that you'll never be a part of. But you have cognitive dissonance thinking that the government has your back. They don't. It's a personal people control system. They want to control us. And that's one of the biggest parts of why they want to keep you depressed. Because, Tucker, when you're constantly depressed, you're in what is called fight or flight. So your hormone response is constant cortisol. And that's why Brian Stelter, those guys, they constantly have the ticker on CNN, how many people die. Because people get addicted to that hormonal response. And once you're in that fear state of fight or flight, you can't see the forest for the tree right in front of your face. So then they can literally, like a dog with a treat, they can make you do whatever you want. And that treat is just more trauma, what I call trauma-based mind control, just more fear tactics in order to control you. So that's what's happening now is the mainstream media, not you, but most of the mainstream media uses fear to control us. And that's the same mechanism that the government uses.
I couldn't agree more.
Also, last but not least, we just completed a 24-hour live stream commemorating the events of 9/11, not with a bunch of things you might have seen on cable TV. No. We presented you with 24 hours of evidence, artifacts, testimony that is inconvenient to the cartoonish narrative that people have been fed about those events.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
And to kick it off, let's go to Luke Radowski of We Are Change and thebestpoliticalshirts.com for a little deep dive into this week's news.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Your official response was that it was the firefighters. My question is, it was pretty clear that you meant the building, and if it was the firefighters, they already are outside the building by 12 because the water lines were broken.
Ask the question.
And the fire chief that you said you spoke to, Fire Chief Negro, denies talking to you on that day of 9/11. Can you answer those questions and address the theories against you?
I suggest, for everybody's consideration, that we all look at the thousands of pages of testimony that have been rendered in the many years since 9/11, and let's use today's session for some of this.
Are you aware of testimony of bombs in the building before the building collapsed, sir? Are you aware of that testimony? Sir, there's testimony by Barry Jennings. Sir, you don't have to touch me. Listen, I'll walk away. All I'm asking is a question. I don't have to be kicked out. It's a legitimate question. You don't have to put your hands on me. But all I'm saying is, no, I'm not. I'm here asking. The question was not answered. That's why I have a grievance. Okay. Larry Silverstein was told not to come into work. That's why him, his daughter, and his son never showed up to work on 9/11. He put an insurance policy on the buildings. Reporters, do your job, please. Ask some questions.
All right. Spoiler alert: they never really started to ask real questions after that.
What makes Autonomy uniquely empowering? Autonomy is a self-help course unlike any other. Over the course of our 12-week program, you'll experience weekly live lectures from Richard Grove, specifically designed to equip you with the skills you need to set yourself free. Free from the learned helplessness taught in our schools, free from the dependence on a corrupt system that serves only to uphold the rich, free from the structure of your 9-to-5 if that's your prerogative. Plus, you'll enter into a community of like-minded individuals who are pursuing the same freedom you are, and who'll support you and learn alongside you every step of the way. A lifetime of community and the tools to live however you want. We can't wait to meet you. Learn more at getautonomy.info.